السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله.
For the Shia of Ali alayhi salam, Muharram is not only a time of renewing the allegiance to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but is also a time of social gathering where like-minded individuals congregate under their shared love for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The spirit of Muharram is like no other. Every year centres and mosques around the world fill up, with large group of people attending to commemorate the tragedy of Karbala. The centres hold programs in which the story of Karbala is retold, lamentations are held and latam is performed to mark the events of the day of Ashura. The year 2020 has been heavily defined by the outbreak of the coronavirus, which saw a large number of deaths around the world. Communities worldwide were required to quarantine and restrictions were implemented on social gatherings and public places. For the first time in history, centres were required to close their doors, limiting the number of attendees and shifting the majority of the audience to online platforms. In this documentary, we look at the unique experience of Muharram in a pandemic and how over 1400 years of cultural mourning were distinctively commemorated under governmental guidelines here in the UK. The effect of the pandemic has been an unusual experience for the Shia community in many aspects. Annually, Shias around the world flock to Karbala to pay visitation to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This year, travelling abroad has been difficult, which meant more than ever a yearning to become close to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Before the start of Muharram this year, centres around the UK announced that they would be holding restricted programs, requiring pre-registration to limit the number of people accessing the buildings. All centres publicised that there would be an online stream for those unable to attend in person, particularly the most vulnerable of the community.
So we had advertised the majalis this year slightly differently to every other year. So what we do every other year is that we send out our posters and we send out our reminders that we are having a massive open majalis for everybody to attend. However, unfortunately this year, because of the pandemic, we were very unable to do so. So what we did instead is that we focused more on the online majalis side of the advertising, because that is what would cater to most people. And what most organizations, not only in the UK but probably around the world, what they did is that they had online majalis instead of having real life majalis due to the pandemic. So we had advertised that, and also we had made our location private, so that the people that attend are only the people who were accepted into the majlis, just so that we can limit the numbers as easily as we could, while keeping everybody as happy as we possibly could. One of the difficulties that we had this year is trying to find that balance of trying to either completely adhere to social restrictions or to have a majlis with the vibes that we have every year. And it was very hard to find that balance, but alhamdulillah, I feel like we have, and we've done it very successfully, in which we had a majlis with the vibes and with the spirituality that we feel every Muharram. However, we also adhere to the social restrictions.
So in terms of the guidelines as put forth by the government for places of worship, there were a lot of different things that had to be done by the trustees or the organisers of the event before a place can be used for worship. In terms of the actual running of the programs, the trustees, for example, had to make sure that they have put a risk assessment in place, that their premises has all the facilities necessary in order to keep the congregation safe. They had to make sure the ventilation is on point, that the hall was big enough to allow a different entry and exit system. People would be sitting at least 1 meter distance between each of the congregants. So that's in terms of setting your premises up. After that, there needs to be a booking system for those coming in and out of the place. You need to be aware of everybody coming in during the program. This information, of course, if, God forbid, there would have been an outbreak, would have been shared with NHS Track and Trace. So the form that you use to book people in had to be quite comprehensive. In terms of the congregation, when they're coming in and out, They need to uphold social distancing at all times. Had the organizers placed clear markers on the floor, they'd have to always use those. Had the organizers placed posters along the wall stating, please no handshake, please, uphold social distancing, etc. All these kind of things that are very, very important.
Due to the pandemic, we did have a lot of restrictions on this majlis, and we had to adhere to a lot of guidelines. So some of the things that we undertook to ensure that the majlis is as safe as possible for people that were entering. The first thing that we did is that we had a huge screen in front of the minbar so that no particles could fly from the sheikh or none could come to him, just so that that decreases the amount of contact between people. We had also had hand sanitizers everywhere, and we ensured that every single person that came in or out had sanitized their hands just to try to keep as safe as possible. We had also made masks obligatory during the whole duration of the majlis. You could not come in or out unless you were wearing a mask, and if you did take it off during the majlis, you were attended to straight away and told to put the mask straight back on, so that we may follow the guidelines and keep everything as safe as possible. We also limited the number of people that came in drastically. So this year we actually managed to pull off a huge venue, but unfortunately we were unable to pack it out with the numbers that we usually do because of the pandemic. So I guess one of the main things that we had done was that we had restricted the number of people that came in. We had also limited contact between people to the extent where even the volunteers wouldn't get very close to each other, and we would stay as far away as possible while working together. We had also assigned certain entrances and exits so that the number of people that collided with each other and that got into big groups was massively decreased. Also, when people came in or out to the majlis, they were allocated to perfect spots so that they wouldn't walk around. They were allocated to their specific spots. When they left in certain lines, just so that the number of people wouldn't collide. And alhamdulillah, although these restrictions were put in place, we still managed to have a majlis for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam.
Here in London, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, we holding this marasim, as we say. It's not as normal as we used to have, but we try to not stopping what we've been raised with. We starting doing the social distancing thing and on the visitors of this Husseiniya, and making sure that they're all hand sanitized with the right gel, and obviously we have a staff downstairs to check each person's coincide with the heat temperature to see everyone is safe there without causing any problems, without causing any harm to the Imam Hussein visitors.
Centres around the UK took measures alongside the guidelines set out to ensure the safety of the staff and attendees. The sight of centres around the UK was one of attendees queuing up outside, waiting for the temperatures to be measured, and for foyers to be clear and safe, and for small groups to enter and be seated. All those entering were required to be wearing a mask as part of the admittance regulations.
So in terms of capacity, there was a lot of confusion about this. I know the number 30 was being thrown around a lot, but that was for life cycle events, such as funerals or weddings. In terms of places of worship, the way that you cap the capacity is depending on the size of the hall. So for example, one of the majalis, their hall was quite small. On a usual day, they would accept about 400 people, that was kept at about 40 or 50 chairs. What they did is 2 square meters every place. Now, the largest majlis in London, the Al Akbar Foundation Majlis, they had a hall that possibly would be able to host 3,000 people sitting on the floor next to each other. They capped it at about 160 people, I believe.
I mean, just going back home after the majlis, seeing my father at home, my mother at home, not being able to attend, that alone breaks my heart, let alone people who have come all the way sometimes from far areas, and we just have to tell them sorry. We have to follow the advice of, number one, the marja'iyah, number two, the government guidelines for the regulations, so that we can keep everyone safe and keep everyone healthy. We have to, unfortunately, it's part and parcel of the majlis this year is that heartbreaking decision of telling people they need to go.
One of the most difficult things that we had to do this year is that we had to turn people away from the majlis. So before our majlis started, before the program started, we had sent out a link so people can sign up, as we had very limited numbers. And in order to attend the majlis, you had to have signed up and gotten confirmed. And unfortunately, we had a massive waiting list of hundreds and hundreds of people who were waiting to come to the majlis. But unfortunately, we were just unable to let them in on some nights because we couldn't do it while keeping with the guidelines, and we wanted to keep the majlis as safe as possible due to the guidelines and due to our own moral responsibilities as well. We didn't want to cause a majlis where an outbreak is caused, la samahallah, of coronavirus, and alhamdulillah we have managed to prevent that.
It is hard, to be honest, to see our majalis as small as now, but we believe it's better than nothing. Each hall has their own capacities. Some of the halls has 30 persons, some 100, 300, 500. Our hall here holding about 130 people. So we try to just make it as right as possible to keep, as I say, to keep the community safe, but not to stop it at all.
Al-Majlis Al-Husseini has been running for over 40 years in London, hosting commemorative events and managing the Ashura Day processions that take place annually. In light of the pandemic, organisers have had to adapt to the guidelines set out, limiting their capacity and managing people in a way they have not had to do for the last 4 decades.
Alhamdulillah, we have complied with Public Health England, we have complied with local agencies and their requirements to make sure people are wearing masks, there is social distancing. We have tried to make sure we comply with the regulatory requirements, and alhamdulillah the patrons have complied. We do have the correct measures in place, and alhamdulillah it has been a successful event and will continue to be a successful event with the blessings of Allah.
Al-Rasul Al-A'zam is a centre that is widely recognised for its symbolic commemorative rituals in the form of reenactments. These typically take place every day during the first 10 nights of Muharram and are a customary way of visually revisiting the tragedy of Karbala, allowing mourners of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam to picture the scenes of heroism and the tragic events that took place on the battlefield.
Every year we're used to having the reenactments of certain individuals in the epic of Karbala. For example, we're used to having Zafat al-Qasim, where we send off the son of Imam Hussein every year, where we have the body and the reenactment of Al-Akbar, Ali Al-Akbar and Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, and also the Radi' of Imam Hussein, Abdullah al-Radi'. Unfortunately this year, again, because of the restrictions that we have, we're unable to reenact and revive these traditions that we have.
According to some Maraja, like the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Sadiq al-Shirazi, there is a wajib kifai to host and attend the majalis, despite the global pandemic being a health crisis. While some people had the privilege of attending majalis, for others this was not so simple. Those at high risk of contracting the coronavirus and deemed most vulnerable or looking after a vulnerable person were unable to attend.
With all the COVID and the pandemic that we're currently going through, obviously with strict rules, such as people have to book in, there is a limited numbers of people going in, and also the age restriction. So unfortunately we had to let some people go just because of they look after elderly person.
So this year, because our program here is limited in terms of how many people we can come here, unfortunately the ladies can't attend the majalis of Abu Abdullah here in this Husseiniya. So usually as a family we would leave our house and come together, but this year unfortunately my sister and my mother, they are unable to attend because of the pandemic.
With the outbreak of corona, the use of online video conferencing platforms gained popularity, with people resorting to them for meetings, social gatherings, and even religious events. Similarly, Husseini organizations, whilst normally catering for online streaming, felt the pressure to perfect the online stream, with the knowledge that the majority of the Shia audience would be heavily relying on these streaming links, yearning for the Husseini presence in their lives during Muharram.
I've been doing media many years. I've been doing Muharram majalis for a long time now, and this year is very different to most. As most people attend majalis through previous years, this year most people were watching from home.
And I felt the pressure, myself and the team who were working with us, to make sure everyone had their streams up and running. There was multiple centers trying to get online, trying to get all the viewers, all the attendees that used to attend that now can't attend due to the COVID pandemic to watch online. I had to make sure the cameras were on point, the internet was on point, and there was easy access for people from home to watch our stream. This year, compared to most, the online presence was significantly higher. As there was less in attendance, there was more people watching at home or watching in their safe environments. Loads of lecturers as well took upon themselves to provide their own majalis from home, whether they could attend the center or not. Big lecturers would create their own YouTube channel and create their own shows, and they will get thousands of views live as well. And most people during Muharram will get thousands of views in lectures, yes, but not live concurrent views, which as we've seen this year has risen. Previous years you get maybe 100 to 200 live views depending on the center. But this year, it was in the thousands. Everyone was watching at home. They were sharing the link. Some people, even in their households, would gather to watch multiple shows.
Crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam is considered seeking nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is only when your heart is soft and absorbable that you feel the sense of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is clear that although the atmosphere of majalis visually did not look the same, the Husseini spirit was very much felt throughout the centers, echoing the grief felt by the lovers of Hussein alayhi salam. Another unique aspect of the Muharram majalis this year was speakers addressing a significantly smaller audience than normal. With hundreds of people usually packing out a venue, the experience of addressing a smaller audience is very unusual.
This year Muharram was different. For myself as a speaker, usually I'm used to having a crowd sitting in front of me. Sometimes you pick up the energy of the crowd, especially during Muharram lectures, especially coming up to the nights of Ashura, where you're going into the Masa'ib, where you're remembering the tragedies of Karbala. You pick up a lot from the actual audience, their reaction, if they cry or a certain story. This year was different because obviously I had to do it in front of the cameras with a very small crowd, limited number of people. But alhamdulillah, I still felt the Muharram energy because I feel that this year Muharram was different because we felt it in our hearts. We yearned to be commemorating the martyrdom of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein salamullahi alayh, and we knew that this year was going to be different because of the coronavirus. But we still said to ourselves that there's this burning flame in our hearts for the love of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, for the martyrdom of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Therefore, even though you might think there might be less of an energy, in fact, this year was better, I would say, than any other year.
Latham is an intimate, personal, and yet a group practice which is significant in the way we express our grief for Imam Hussein. This year, the centers saw those performing Latham adorning their mosques, a picture which has never been seen before in the history of commemorations of Muharram and Ashura. This practice, which is highly sought after as our personal connection to the tragedy of Imam Hussein, was carried out with social distancing measures, somewhat making the intimate process less so. The passion and love for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, however, was still visible, and not even a pandemic can erase the grief and tragedy reverberating the halls.
This pandemic has also affected recitations because within the guidelines you're not allowed to give jawab, reciting with the radud, and the radud has to be behind a window. So it makes it difficult for a reciter to give everything he can, because it's all dependent on him, and everything, all the pressure of the majlis has been put on him to give the jawab and also give the recitation that he has prepared.
With every year, the main media focused attention of the program is Latam, and this year there wasn't any, or most centers didn't have any. So with that, it was difficult to show the people at home, because that's eulogies and recitation is the key thing, is the main reason why people attend, from what I've seen over the past few years. And with this being missing, it was quite difficult, and the focus was changed, the dynamic was changed of all our jobs.
In a time where isolation has pushed people away from each other, the love of Imam Hussein alayhi salam has brought people together in the form of combined efforts by a number of organizations to distribute food in the name of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This has meant a unity and a sense of togetherness that we have never seen before. The generosity of Shia Muslims shines through during the nights of Muharram, with food distributions being a major part of the rituals. The organizations working together adopted the process of registration for food to enable those unable to attend centers to receive the barakah, or the blessings of Imam Hussein alayhi salam.
A lot of majalis haven't been able to host as many people. So as an alternative, we have organized something called the Muharram Tabarruk Initiative, in which we provide more than 1,500 boxes of food, portions of food to people's houses as an alternative to them being able to attend the majalis. This is in order to keep the spirit of Muharram and the message of Imam Hussein, the message of generosity and love and providing for those in need. The most incredible aspect of this is that 3 or 4 organizations have come together to make this happen. And these organizations are, of course, Al-Akbar Foundation, Shabab Sultain, who are known to be traditionally Iraqi organizations, as well as the Khoja community have been involved through Al-Hadi Youth. And this is the amazing thing about this year. Despite the troubles that we have with the global pandemic and the effects it had on us, we've managed to come together. And that is the most amazing thing about the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, of brotherhood and love.
So the Muharram Tabarruk initiative was one that was set up by the brothers at Shabab Sultain and Al-Akbar Foundation. They got in touch a few weeks before Muharram started, the month of Muharram set in, and after having already helped us with our Hujjat Iftar initiative, and asked to see if we can replicate something like this.
So during the pandemic, it's actually been quite difficult for people to leave their homes and attend the majalis. So one of the reasons that we're doing this is to maintain the spirit of Muharram and provide people with food directly to their homes, alhamdulillah, in the name of Imam Hussein.
Undoubtedly, for those who attended the majalis this year, they did feel that it was different, with various elements they are accustomed to being absent.
Most challenging part about this year's majalis was to make sure that all the equipment were always all desanitized, make sure that's all clean. And as myself, I was running around between different centers. I had to make sure I followed the regulations. It was difficult getting around. I had to make sure I obviously did not have corona myself, make sure I try not to spread or have any contact with anyone, to make sure all the equipment as well, as we had to hire or rent out some equipment due to the shortage, that to make sure everything was with regulations, make sure it was all clean and safe for everyone else.
So we're obviously used to every year the qiyam that the speaker does to bring everyone closer to the mimbar, so we can fit as many of our guests as we can, and we would try to get as many people as we can into the majlis. Even just simple things like giving out water to the guests that are coming, things like that we can't do, and we're not used to it. We didn't grow up like that. So in that sense, it's also very difficult this year for us.
One of the things that we missed this Muharram was the gatherings after the actual majlis would finish, where we would sit down and have the tabarruk, the food together. We would remember stories of ziyarah, we would talk about stories that affected us, or sometimes even narrations from Imam al-Hussein. We couldn't do that this year. Another thing we couldn't do this year is actually try and attend more than one majlis. Because of the social distancing, because of some majalis actually made sure that you register to enter, you couldn't really know where you were going that specific night. So we couldn't attend more than one majlis.
There were some difficulties, of course. Adhering to the restrictions was very hard. It's not something that we're used to. And alhamdulillah, we're used to welcoming in everybody into the majlis. However, this year we had to limit. We had to ensure that everybody's wearing their masks, which although it was tough for the attendees, it was tough for the volunteers as well to follow these restrictions. But alhamdulillah, every difficulty when it comes to Abu Abdullah is a ni'mah, and every difficulty is a mercy. And we enjoy taking on these challenges as we know that we are growing ourselves in the love of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam.
The event of Karbala is full of lessons that are worth being reviewed every day and night to help the growth of human society. Lessons of heroism, standing against cruelty, defending human dignity, and complete obedience of God. Whilst 2020 has been a unique experience for many Shias around the world, this did not take away from the level of respect and need to revive the message of Karbala.
What made this year Muharram different was that we realized how much we need that spiritual upliftment when it comes in Muharram. During our lives, throughout the year, we're busy at work, with our routine, with our families, with materialistic stuff around the world. And then you have sometimes the month of Ramadan and Muharram, where you sometimes go into a pit stop, where you change your tires, change your oil. And that's how it was for us. Muharram and Ramadan is a time where you leave your materialistic world, go to the mosque and get that spirituality from the Ahlul Bayt, from their du'as, from their memories, from their stories. And this year we didn't have that. And it was during Ramadan and during Muharram. But alhamdulillah, we realized that we're going to make Muharram bigger this year. The scholars, the marja'iyya, pushed for the remembrance and the commemorations of Abu Abdullah to continue no matter what.
It was very, prideful for me to see the Shia community uphold these great standards. And I hope that other communities in their worship, in their festivals and celebrations can actually look at what we did during Muharram and take from that and learn from that and execute from that. Because that's a pride for all of us, for everyone who flew the flag of Imam Hussein alayhi salam during this Muharram. It was the most bizarre Muharram I've ever seen in my life. It was the most difficult. And people, did what they had to do, and they were very responsible and serious. And for that, they have my gratitude. I was really, really worried that we weren't going to have any majalis. And that would have been heartbreaking, especially for me and others from our community. The last time majalis were cancelled, in my mind, that we remember, was during the time of the tyrant Saddam al-Tikriti. Alhamdulillah, I hope and I pray that we will never again see the days where there are no majalis. And I pray that everyone always acts responsibly, follows the guidelines, follows the rulings of the marja'iyya that were very clear, and continue to execute amazing programs that adhere to the guidelines and keep everyone safe.
So we talk about a lot of the things that have been negative because of coronavirus in this Muharram, i.e. not being able to hold majalis in congregation and be able to do latmiya in congregation. But this has been something that we should definitely take away for the future years to come, that as a united ummah, we stand together and propagate the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam.
Imam Hussein salamullah alayhi, it's a path. We have to go on. We have to hold our kids. We have to show others that this path will never end, will never stop, and nothing can stop it. Nothing can stop it.
Inshallah, for the rest of our lives, that no matter what happens, no matter what we may encounter, we will always hold a majlis in the dhikr of Abu Abdullah, and inshallah from this year onwards, we can be at your service in the remembrance of the master of the youth of paradise, Imam Hussein alayhi salam.
With the future still holding so much uncertainty, and as the pandemic is still very much amidst us, it is safe to say that wherever we are and whatever may be happening, the revival of the message of Hussein alayhi salam will never subside, and there will always be a group of Shia to mourn for him and to make sure that his call so many years ago continues to be answered.
لبيك يا حسين. لبيك يا حسين.